Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ambaa Wellness TV, your weekly dose of health and well-being. My name's Counsel, and I would like to thank you for joining me. This week's video is a bit of a carry-on from last week's video where I talked about what is healthy, and where I turned around the thoughts that what is healthy is not about how we feel, but it's really about how the body functions. And sometimes when we get expressions of this function, our body is actually being really healthy. So I'm going to go through a couple of these instances today so you can get an idea of what I mean. Let's start with the yucky stuff first. We'll get that over and done with, and that's the gastro bug, the vomiting and the diarrhea. What is happening when we get gastro? So our body has consumed something, and sometimes it can be a virus that's come in that we've brought in. It can be bacteria that comes in with different food that's been spoiled, there's food poisoning. Sometimes it can be some alcohol, which is a poison to the body. Too much of it is a poison to the body. Lots of things that we get into our digestive tract is not good for us. So the body protects us, and it says it doesn't want this substance in our body. The first thing the immune system does is it mounts a defense. So it tries to get rid of what it is. And sometimes if it's a viral infection, it may get rid of it and you don't really know about it. But bacterial infections are a bit harder for the immune system to deal with, and obviously poisons and toxins are even harder. The immune system really can't get rid of them. So if the immune system can't deal with what's going on, what it does is it tells the body it needs to get rid of this substance because it's a poison, and we don't want this poison in the body. So what happens is the body then starts to expel it. And depending where it is in the digestive tract, if it's in the upper digestive tract, we vomit it. If it's in the lower digestive tract, diarrhea. Sometimes it can be spread throughout. We have both going at the same time. Not a very comfortable time. Now, what that is the body getting rid of something it doesn't want. So if we go and take a medication that suppresses the vomiting or suppresses the diarrhea, whatever is causing the problem is still there, and the body wants to get rid of it. Now, if it's a viral infection, that can go on for a few days because viruses will grow, and they grow within our bodies. And if the immune system can't deal with it, it will stay there and it'll just keep fighting, and that's where we can have these gastro infections that can go on, for a week, 2 weeks, because we're trying to stop them and we're not supporting the immune system to allow it to do its job. Some of these gastro infections, food poisoning, last 24 hours because the body just expels everything and then it's over and done with. Same as when you go out and have a heavy night. Basically, you'll just expel everything that the body needs to get rid of, and then you'll start to feel better. But the function of getting rid of these things that the body doesn't want is a natural function. So we shouldn't be suppressing it. We should be supporting our bodies and our immune system. And even though it might be uncomfortable for 24, 48, maybe 36 hours, it's the body doing what it needs to do. We just need to make sure that we keep ourselves hydrated and rest, and the body will do the rest of its job. Let's move on to something a little bit more pleasant, bleeding. When we cut ourselves, obviously if we break the skin, the blood will flow. Now what a lot of people will do is they'll go and they'll run and wash it off, put a band-aid on it to stop the bleeding. But bleeding is a function of the body, and we actually want to bleed because what the bleeding does is it washes the wound and it gets rid of any bacterial infection, because the blood's actually got our immune system in it. It's got white blood cells in it. So the blood brings all the white blood cells to the surface to get rid of any bacteria, any viruses, and keep the wound clean. The blood will eventually stop flowing because it will clot, and that clotting is actually the healing, and that's what heals the skin or whatever it is that we've broken. So if we go and wash the blood away, put a band-aid on it, it takes so much longer to heal because we've removed the healing properties of the blood. Also, we're prone more to infection because we've removed that cleaning property of the blood. So next time if you start to bleed, don't go and wash it away and don't stop the blood. It will stop bleeding on its own accord very quickly, unless of course you have a blood disease. That's a little bit different. If you have a bleeding disorder, don't bleed. Don't continue to bleed. But most people don't have that. Just allow it to bleed, and the body will go into its own healing process. Once the bleeding has stopped, you can clean the mess up afterwards. So look at the bleeding. And the other thing I want to talk about really quickly before I go is swelling. And when we have an injury, because the first thing, and I know I've done sports med, I've done all that, RICE, rest, ice, compression, elevate. That's what we do as soon as we have an injury. But what is swelling? When we say twist our ankle, we damage fibres, we damage tissue. The swelling is there for a reason, because what the swelling does is, number one, it immobilises the joint so that we can stop moving it, so we can get off it. So if our ankle isn't all swollen, we can't walk on it. If it's sore, we can't walk on it. And that's what the swelling does. And then it brings all this blood to the area, which has got healing properties in it, to try and heal all of the damaged fibres, all the tendons and the muscle tears that have occurred. All the blood and chemicals actually heal all that. But when we go and put ice on it, we numb it. So now we can't feel it. Then we get up and we start walking on it because we've numbed it. And sometimes we do more damage, or the tissues don't repair quickly. So that's why it can take quite some time. And I've had this problem where I've twisted my ankle and it can take up to 3 weeks to start to heal, because, you know, I've iced it and I put it up and all of that, but I didn't stop walking on it. I didn't rest. And what my body wanted me to do was get off it so I could heal it. And whilst it's swollen and it's red and it's sore, which is inflammation, the body is trying to repair that. The quicker we allow our bodies to do its function, the quicker it will repair itself. So sometimes we just have to trust. Trust that our body knows exactly what it needs to do, and we don't need to interfere. I'm going to come back to you next week and talk to you a little bit more about this, and talk to you about the messages that we're giving our children about health and well-being. So until next week, let me know. Make some comments down below. What do you think? Do you agree with me? How do you feel about, you know, what we've been doing with our first aid and everything we get taught about first aid? What do you think? Feel free to share this with other people, because I know there's a lot of people out there who aren't going to agree with me, and that's fine. But I'd like to have more conversation about it. So until next week, I'll see you then. Bye.